Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Clarion University's literary magazine, Tobico's first open mic, or virtual open mic of the fall 2020 semester. And it is my great pleasure. We've been able to get an absolutely terrific reader to launch our season. We could not be more excited. We've got James Charlesworth coming to us from Boston tonight. James is originally an Altoona native, but he's living in Boston now. And the miracle of the internet is allowing him to present this evening as our reader. So that's awesome. James' first novel is called The Patricide of George Benjamin Hill. It was published in 2019. His writing has appeared in Natural Bridge, and he was also awarded finalist status in Glimmer Train's Short Story Award for New Writers. He's the recipient of the Martin Dilber Fellowship. And he is going to be reading for us tonight. And if you are also going to be wanting to read right after James, please, as James is finishing up, click the link in our comment section that will put you in the queue to read. So let me bring James on. James Charlesworth, how are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. It's really awesome to have you here at Clarion University's Tobico open mic to kick us off for this season. We could not be happier.
It's a thrill to be here. I'm really excited to kick off, this great event. And I'm looking forward to hearing lots of great writing after I get out of the way and step aside and let everybody else take the stage.
All right. Well, I'm going to get off the stage and let you get us started. Are you? I want to ask, what are you going to be reading tonight?
I'm going to read from the novel. Is that okay?
Oh, that is absolutely awesome. I was just going to say, hey, make sure you show that novel so people can see the Patricide of George Hill. Run out and buy this book. All right. I'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you for listening. I'm excited to read tonight from my novel. Here it is. It's called The Patricide of George Benjamin Hill. I'll just tell you really quickly. When I was writing this book, when people would ask me what it was about, I would always tell them it's about 4 adult siblings who decide to kill their father. But then I would sort of qualify that and say it's not as dark as it sounds, which is sort of true and maybe sort of not true. But the point is the book's about a lot more than that. It's really about the lives of these 4 siblings and their father, the eponymous George Benjamin Hill, who is a Dust Bowl orphan turned self-made millionaire in fast food and oil, who has kind of ruined 2 families in his relentless pursuit of wealth and his relentless pursuit of financial success. And now he has these 4 adult siblings who are estranged, living in the 4 corners of the country. One of them lives in New York City, one lives in Miami, one lives in Las Vegas, and one lives in Alaska. And in the present tense of the story, these 4 siblings sort of find themselves converging on their father, who is semi-retired and enormously wealthy and embroiled in scandal and living in Omaha, Nebraska. So that's kind of one of the narratives of the story, is these 4 siblings converging. It's kind of a road novel in some ways, but it also jumps around in time a lot, and you get to see the siblings when they're kids too, and sort of what drove them to this. The novel's sort of about like the discovery of what has led them to this. So it starts in the present tense. I'm just going to read the first, 8 pages. There's a prologue that begins in the present tense, and then the story goes back in time, kind of starts back at the beginning. It's the beginning of the book, so I don't think I need to explain anything to you. 4 hours in, his plan nearly dies. A storm whites out the sky above Icy Bay, obscuring the 18,000-foot glacial dump of Mount St. Elias. He has piloted his second-hand DHC Beaver down from Fairbanks on a day that dawned brilliant with autumn, the wilderness a thousand-hued carpet. Now the system has stormed in from the southwest, roiling off the Pacific and blooming silver on the ridgeline of the Wrangell Mountains, the corridor of light from the retrofitted headlamps illuminating the precipitation that rattles the airframe and freezes on impact. He is a veteran of this weather, has nearly 20 years of bush experience, has piloted this battered vessel as far north as Nome, as far south as Kodiak Island, has guided it through storms like the end of the world to set it down on strips of fireweed the size of city driveways, has logged more hours than half the so-called pilots flying commercial jets in the lower 48. But today was the one day he had wished for calm weather, had hoped for clear skies to give him time to think. From Juneau, he will catch a flight south to Seattle, from there on to Las Vegas, and then by car east to Omaha via Denver. But first, there is the process of selling his plane. He's already sold his pickup truck, his guns, his hunting and trapping equipment, has already foregone every possession, including the cabin and parcel of land straddling the Canadian border where he thought he would spend the remainder of his life. Why has he done this? He has done it at the behest of the calling that has tormented him for the past 3 years. He's done it for the money that will help him to procure the object that has become his preoccupation, the motive that has led him to track down and send letters to the 3 siblings he's not seen in 20 years, that has led him now, in the year of his 41st birthday, to be on his way to Omaha, Nebraska, to find the man he now refuses to call father. It almost dies up here, in the turbulent solitude of 15,000 feet. Impact ice in the air intake causing the engine to run rough, a drop in manifold pressure. The tachometer flickers as ice begins to form in the carburetor. The engine coughs and then is silent. He lowers the nose into the whine of wind and procession of cloud, flaps at cruise to maintain airspeed, opens the throttle and primes with the wobble pump. Up ahead, invisible, is the face of a mountain, a cliffside, a spectacular death. If the restart fails, a dead engine landing is impossible. He closes his eyes and waits for it, and then, against every lesson life has taught him up to this point, the engine crackles and returns. The lights of the instrument panel dazzle. He re-engages the controls and imagines he can hear the landing gear scraping the frozen peaks of the foothills. The system passes and he is aloft in the blue dome over Glacier Bay, the archipelago speckling the golden ocean. The sun is at his back and showing purple on the snow-covered mountainside, assuring him, yes, you were saved today. You were saved from certain destruction in order to finish what you have started. As he radios in his descent, he watches the light prism on the water and the tin rooftops of a salmon town and the icy ridge above and whispers something inaudible. Not a prayer, he doesn't believe in God, but a pledge. To his twin sister, to his half-brothers, to his estranged mother, and finally to the man he refuses to call father, the man whose far-off mansion on the plains marks the X spot of this 3,000-mile journey, the man whose life story will always serve as preamble to his own. Get a drink. It begins half a century earlier. On a sun-dried day in January 1956, 75 degrees in midwinter, for there were no seasons here in San Bernardino, in the arid valley that separated the city of the stars from the desert, a 24-year-old delivery boy named George Hill, though he went by Georgie in those days, arrived in his 4-axle delivery truck in the sand lot out back of the burger stand that was the last on his route every Friday. He was sweating. He'd worked 50 hours this week. He and his wife had an argument the night before, an argument centered around several small things and one not small thing. When the raised voices had proven inadequate for conveying her feelings, she'd thrown a pot at him and struck him in the face, which was why he had a Band-Aid on his forehead, the skin beneath which was itching and driving him crazy. Yet another thing that was driving him crazy. His young son, GB, was turning 5 in 2 weeks, and he was afraid he'd stop loving him, Or maybe he'd simply stopped loving his wife, the woman who only 6 years previously had advanced to the final round of the country's most prestigious beauty pageant, whose graceful promenades across the stage and runways of Boardwalk Hall could not have predicted her proficiency in pot throwing, and who told him just months before that what he'd been dreading was true. She was pregnant again. The first time he'd heard these words from Mary, it had been confirmation of his arrival. Until then, he'd been a silent, restless boy, a directionless, insecure adolescent. He'd avoided mirrors throughout his youth, originally because there were none to be found in the drafty, ramshackle homestead on the Oklahoma Panhandle, whose 160 acres of dying fields had formed the bleak backdrop of his earliest years. Later, because he couldn't bear to look at himself, despised his lank, greasy hair and olive skin and heavy brow, hated his long arms and the unavoidable slouch that was his father's slouch, the slouch of an overworked Okie raised up in Spartan conditions on the Great Plains, on plows and in sweltering stables, endless days of sweat and sore muscles. In his siblings, he had always detected inheritances from their mother, her stern but gentle eyes, her coarse but lively hair, her soft-spoken wisdom, but not in Georgie. When they'd moved down here the summer the war ended, his father had one message for Georgie. Never be afraid, he told his young son, to take a risk in life. You look at all the successful people in the world, I'll tell you one thing they all have in common. They all had a chance to take a risk or sit on their ass, and not a one of them chose to sit on his ass. What do you think we did when we saw that dust bowl rising up around us? Did we sit back on our ass? No, sir. We picked up and we moved on, and look at us now. This and his used Packard on the way south from Bakersfield, just the two of them, the rest of what had been a family of 7 eradicated on the trip west over Route 66 and in the war in Europe. His father had heard of work in the newly thriving city of San Bernardino, a dusty valley in the center of a bowl at the foot of the mountain sharing the name of the same saint. He'd heard there were all sorts of jobs springing up for men willing to get up off their duff and do it. Good, honest work for a solid wage, not this shady business on the grape farms, working like a slave for wages little better than the Mexicans. He'd come down a week earlier and gotten them a place, had found a job cleaning swimming pools, came home and told Georgie it wasn't easy in this heat, wasn't backbreaking though, wasn't nothing he couldn't handle. Went back the next day and fell in the pool and drowned. Couldn't swim. Was an Okie through and through. Nobody had been around to hear his splashing. The folks who owned the house had arrived home the next day to find a figure in a starch white uniform floating face down in their swimming pool. Had called the cleaning company, who'd come over to pick out the body. They turned Georgie over to orphan support, operated out of a mission-style building near the Rancho Cucamonga line. 2 years spent prowling those crowded hallways, waiting in line for stale food and lying in hard cots staring up at a dark ceiling, 4 to a room. On his 15th birthday, Georgie and a group of them had formed a solemn pact to escape and set up on the outside, make some fast cash robbing jewelry stores and maybe some trains. They'd planned and executed a late-night liberation under cover of the smog-laden LA stars, had climbed into the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, living in the wilderness for all of 17 hours before one of their number was attacked by a coyote and had to be taken back down to the city. Their plans for escape fizzled. The boy who nearly had his arm chewed off by the coyote was adopted within a month, which touched off a brief smattering of self-injury. It didn't work. Georgie climbed up to the roof of the orphanage and stood looking down at the pavement 6 stories below, pictured himself executing a graceful dive to splatter on the blacktop, saw his blood brown and dust-colored like the world he'd come from, the world he knew he belonged to, though he couldn't stand even to imagine the worthless middle-of-nowhere people they'd been back then, working like dogs on 160 acres, 12 hours a day, even him, a 4-year-old kid, and for what? An uncertain existence that could turn like a tornado and did just that the year the rain stopped and the blowing dust swept across the plain, enveloping them all and setting in motion the events that had led to their perilous hike to the Pacific, leaving his mother and little brother and little sister dead of pneumonia, 2 brothers shot to pieces on French beaches. What good was life if these were the sort of decisions it left you with? Whether or not to jump off the roof of the 6-story orphanage, the last surviving member of your family. And what about those folks with the swimming pool? Those folks who could afford to have a tub of however many gallons of water in the backyard? What was it that made one person like they were and another person like Georgie's father? It wasn't following a string of flyers 1,000 miles west of Grape Country. It wasn't packing your bags and moving south to some upstart city outside LA. But if it wasn't any of those things, then what was it? Georgie saw the haze drift off the desert breeze and thought he caught a glimpse of the same stars he'd once seen so clearly back on the farm, sitting on the back porch with his mama, or off in the fields on a retired plow with his older brother Carl and little sister Debbie. He looked at the stars so long and with such fervency that he forgot entirely what he'd come up here to do. And when he remembered where he was and why, and had crept over to the edge of the roof and looked down, it filled him with such fear that he had to fold his legs up against his chest, had to wrap his arms around his knees to stop trembling. So I'll stop there.
Wow, James, that was absolutely amazing. You are the real deal.
Thank you, Damien. I appreciate that.
It was so, I mean, wonderful, wonderful prose, just such linguistic prowess.
Thank you.
And a lovely story. It just pulls you right in. I don't know if everyone who's watching our broadcast tonight knows this, but you just did a little workshop for some of our students talking about the virtues of medias res. And you so practice what you preach.
Right. I was glad to look back and realize that my novel actually does do what I told everybody to do, which is begin in the middle of things, and then go back and kind of give context. So yeah, no, I was glad that I follow my own rules. Surprised to find that I follow my own rules.
Yeah, no, that was just such a depth of characterization. We placing us in a very specific California.
Mm.
I think about, sometimes you read, like, there's Henry Miller and F. Scott Fitzgerald were both writing about New York at the same kind of moment in time. And you think the cities exist in different universes.
Yeah, right. There was a ton of research for this book. I mean, it takes place in a lot of different geographic locations, but also it takes place in a lot of different geographic locations in a lot of different time periods. So there's California in the 50s. There's a long section that takes place in Las Vegas in the 80s. There's a section that takes place in Fairbanks, Alaska in the 70s during the building of the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. So there was a lot of research. And I mean, I love doing that kind of research. And it's just sort of finding just enough details to make it sound like you know what you're talking about. Like for instance, I've never flown a plane, but it's just the research of making it sound like I would know exactly what to do if I was flying a plane and suddenly the engine gave out.
Yeah, no, if we were on some Cessna somewhere in bush country, Alaska, I'm thinking, oh yeah, we're no problem. James can take the stick and we'll be fine.
Right. You would totally think that, but we would not be fine.
So I want to say, if there are students, community members, other faculty members, now is the time to click the StreamYard link to queue up to be our next reader on Clarion's inaugural open mic night. Although I have to admit, I think people might be intimidated.
It's so weird. I haven't read from that in a while. It's so weird reading something that you wrote a really long time ago. It's bizarre.
It's almost like creating this sort of magic spell. But I love the whole business of California. Like that kind of it's like this kind of almost Steinbeckian, and I almost moved to San Bernardino once, so it felt very familiar. Right? That, luckily, my bad judgment didn't quite carry me that far.
Yeah, I wanted to really kind of capture that sort of like hyper cinematic feel of California. I mean, it's just such a mystical, strange place, but it has such a strong feel to it. And that was something hopefully I was able to pull off. The first, I don't know, 40 pages or so of the novel take place in Southern California. So it was a really important part of the book. Like I had to nail the ambiance. The first 40 pages, aside from that opening, which is in Alaska, in case anybody didn't realize that's where the plane was. But yeah, no, I'm glad to hear you say that. I was able to pull it off.
No, yeah. I mean, it felt so much a dimensionalized place with a fully formed character in it. This is really impressive.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, there's one of the things, and I'm just gabbing until other people come up and start reading. I'm looking forward to hearing other people read. The book sort of dips into like what I think of are sort of like these classic and important moments like in history. So of course you have the Great Depression and like, you know, the Grapes of Wrath. Obviously that first section borrows heavily from the Grapes of Wrath. I mean, I basically put the characters in the Jodes jalopy with them and sort of trek west with them. But I mean, that was kind of intentional. That's kind of what I wanted to do, was create this character in George Benjamin Hill who sort of like kind of embodies all that's tragic and all that's sort of damaged about the last 70 or 80 years or whatever of American history, you know, and sort of show kind of the wreckage of his offspring, like what some of those old ways of looking at masculinity, parenting, sort of kind of the price of that. So that's kind of what I was going for there. Sorry to ramble.
No. We're trying to get some folks are trying to get in, and let's.
Oh no.
Let me just. There we go.
All I know is Nicholas better read. I'm calling you out.
Well, I think I'm gonna start us off with this open mic, because maybe they are just afraid to go after you, and if I read, people will be less intimidated.
This will just up the stakes, man.
Oh, I love. By the way, one more thing I have to say, like that business about getting off your ass. Like if I didn't know, that felt so convincing. Like if I didn't know you were like the nicest person in the world, I think, man, that Charlesworth guy, boy, he sounds like. Sounds like a role, you know. You just kind of so completely capture that character.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's definitely. I think people, I don't know. Part of the problem with writing a book about sort of characters that have a lot of flaws is your readers sometimes feel like those are your flaws, you know, or like if you're trying to embody a character that has really outdated views, you know, about.
Right.
About gender and race, and people, the danger is that people are going to think that, you know, those are your views. But the way I look at it is, you know, it's about telling a real story, you know, and creating real characters. And part of that is portraying characters that have different worldviews than we do, and worldviews that might scare us and horrify us. But there's a reason we're putting them out on the stage, right? We're showing the problem. We're not necessarily hopefully we're not a part of the problem. If that makes any sense.
Oh no, very much. As somebody who's written a historical novel, you know, it's that question: why are people acting like this? Well, this is, you know, I'm sort of you're sort of holding it up, And so you just make some judgments about people acting like that.
Right, exactly.
So your workshop talked about first lines. I have to admit, I kind of went to this story, and I was like, boy, I hope I'm following, James's dictums with regard to first line.
I'll be the judge of that.
Well, okay. This is there's
my favorite stroke. All right.
let me. I'm gonna pull you off and pull you back on in a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So this is a story called In State. When my Uncle Edwin died suddenly, it took no small amount of effort for my father and other uncles to get him laid out in the courthouse down on Center Avenue in the heat of late July. But it wasn't his backroom deals smelling of bribery and leaving him in semi-disgrace that bothered us at the end. It wasn't that his heart gave out in the frame house of his mistress in Q Creek, or that he was reputed to be in the pocket of the frackers from North Texas ever since a pair of Super Bowl tickets magically appeared the year the Steelers whomped the Cardinals. When we saw the National Guard troops in their wrinkly camouflage exit the half-track and make for the hearse that hauled Edwin's spindly body up from Indian Lake, we forgot about his years of shady doings. His brusque manner and grasping outside children were all but erased. Watching his coffin hoisted up the tiered marble steps and borne between the granite columns under the semicircle of portico and through the big double doors into the rotunda, we reveled, my cousins and me, in the sense that we were, at least by proxy, somebody's. That since our great-grandfather had been clubbed senseless on the steps of the company store during the 46 coal strike, we had made progress enough for this. We listened as our shoes clicked across the marble floors in a haughty rhythm, felt our backs straighten, our faces suitably severe as we waited for the few mourners who would gather. When the family of pasty English tourists fluttered through the security, we wondered how they had gone so far astray from the memorial at Shanksville. Alien accents echoed off the walls. They chittered to each other, gawking at the bearded portraits of the 19th century judges, examined the mounted quilts, the framed treaty between the settlers and the Indians. Occupied with the bust of General Braddock near the door, they ignored Uncle Edwin completely until the boy pointed and whispered something to his wilting mother. The woman, white as flour where she was not red as an apple, told her son not to be frightened, that my Uncle Edwin was just another curiosity, an exhibit made likely of wax. After all, she told him, they wouldn't just leave a body here. Not even Americans would do that.
Well, I must say, your first sentence passes the test for sure. That you are solidly in medias res.
Well, that's good to know.
Homer would approve.
Well, I mean, who might argue with Homer? All right, we seem to. I see Kirk is trying to get on, but I don't fully understand why, unless I don't know. Kirk, if we're delayed, but that should not impact this so over much. I don't know. Maybe you frightened our students off, but I bet they're going to be ready to kick some butt and take some names at the next open mic.
I hope so.
Hold on, I'm getting a text to see. Oh well, we have a guest. We have a guest. Dr. Christina Fasonic from the University of California, Calorarian, Ed Calaburroian, is now going to read. Let me just pull her in here. All right, colleague, how are you?
I am good. I've been watching live from the Facebook feed and enjoying James and your reading. And I thought if you needed a reader, maybe I would go, and this would encourage. students to step forward, or community members and other people to come forward and read. So, and I see we have another person too. See, I knew it. Once I came on, somebody else would join us. So my piece is very short, and then we'll let her take the stage. Are you ready?
We are. I'm going to disappear, and James is going to disappear, and I'll be back. And we'll be back.
Okay. So this piece, I read this to my own students the other day to talk about revision. This piece started out as a very short poem about 13 or 14 years ago, and I revisited it about a month ago, and this is what I came up with. It is now a piece of micro nonfiction, so it's very short. This is called What This Is Not. Early spring evening near 7, the neighbor's dog is barking. In his normally joyful voice, a certain hollowness I recognize. I move to shut my office window against his morning yowl and discover that the air has grown cold, the once blue sky bruised by rain clouds. My hands pause on the windowsill as I imagine for a moment that it's late fall and this is West Virginia, not Ohio. I am walking down the gravel lane to my childhood home. Wood smoke swirls from the house next door, and brown leaves crunch under the worn soles of my second-hand boots. Through our trailer window, I watch my grandmother Jean mix cinnamon and cloves into pumpkin bread batter. I tromp up the steps with the bottle of vanilla borrowed from our neighbor Sue and swim through the oven-warmed kitchen. Grandma's slender fingers work the red lid off the top and drop dollops of the heady liquid into the lime green Pyrex bowl filled with batter. I get lost watching her polished pink nails move through my memory, stirring the mixture with a wooden spoon, pouring it into a loaf pan, handing me the bowl and spoon to lick. I am pulled out of my reverie by my now cold hands. They ache as they lower the rickety window of the 3-story rental crammed too close to my stranger neighbor, whose Dalmatian has found as much reason to speak of his loneliness as I have to speak of mine. Thank you guys for letting me read that little piece. I can't wait to hear everybody else.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Fisonic, for joining us this evening. I see Brianna Schwab, and we've got Kirk Wise coming up. Brianna, I'm going to pull her on. She was the editor of, there we go. The last year's of Tobacco. So, Brianna, are you ready to do some reading?
Not really. Don't really have anything new prepared, but I know how hard it is to get readers, so I'll contribute something.
Okay. So I'm going to disappear and let you read.
Okay. So don't really have anything prepared. So also sorry about the posters in the background. I'm a big Twilight fan. And so a piece I wrote a very long time ago, probably back in high school. I haven't read it since, so we're gonna see how this goes because again I didn't really prepare. It's called Impulsion, but it's a short story. I guess we'll just say it's a short story. I don't really know what to call it. Okay. Sitting on a sturdy, tall oak tree branch, the night is a dark one. Not even the moon is venturing out behind its safe clouds. The night, combined with the foliage that is so thick with forest green leaves, provides good cover. Summertime usually brings warm, humid days and nights, crickets chirping, owls hooting, but tonight is different. There is a breeze running through the air, the leaves rustling, and the hairs on the nape of my neck stand up as goosebumps form on my arms, even though I'm wearing a heavy jacket. The only other sounds are coming directly below me. The boy, with his jacket and baggy shorts on, sits on the brown wooden bench smiling, as if he's just unwrapped the best Christmas gift ever. His smile makes the sun look like a dim flashlight, and his laugh, from time to time, is contagious with warmth and friendship. He smiles frequently when he's with her, but never once has he ever looked at me with those delicate eyes I always look for. The girl, dressed in one of his sweatshirts, sits on his lap with one hand around his neck and the other through his dark hair. Her laugh is sickly sweet, like a candy that is so full of sugar it almost tastes sour, and makes me wonder if she's actually being genuine. My hands are already starting to become clammy, waiting for the right opportunity. He doesn't even know my name, let alone that I exist. A reference to that girl is all I ever got from him. I smiled brighter than a car reflecting from the light every time he walked by, hope coursing through my body that maybe today was the day of a return smile from him. Not even a glance in my direction was the most common result, but when she always walked past and smiled, it was like fireworks on the 4th of July on his face. They'll have to leave soon. He won't miss her curfew because he has gone to bring the car around. Finally, now is my chance. My adrenaline pumps faster than it ever has before. The air rushes past my ears as I swoop in for the kill. The gleaming knife enters her chest multiple times, and her pathetic screams end, just like her pathetic life. I can barely catch a whiff of her citrus perfume, the only part of her that's alive anymore. My breathing has returned to normal because the deed is done. If I can't have him, then no one will. A car door slams too close for my comfort. The knife tightens in my grasp. My breathing is harsh and fast again, and my heart feels like it might explode from the raging fire within. I whirl around, knife poised, and the last thing I see are those chocolate brown eyes of his, filled with fear. The knife, my hands, and the air are drenched with the metallic smell of warm, fresh blood. Tears sting my face and fall onto his cheek until the sun shines down on us and the darkness inside envelops me into emptiness. That's pretty much all I got. So that was kind of I guess, the epitome, I don't know if that's the right word, of teenage angst in high school. So that's all I got. That's all I prepared.
All right. Well, thank you, Brianna. I will. Yikes! That's metallic smell of blood. Goodness. I can see your Twilight fandom.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I see Kirk is coming on. I'm gonna pull Kirk on.
Am I
Good
on?
evening. How are you? You are.
I'm pretty good. And you know what? Even though I'm an electronics expert and a technology expert, sometimes simple things baffle me. And that's why it took me a while to figure out how this worked. But I did. And I could read you a couple of my very short, trite poems. I'm a very prolific poet, although some may not like it.
All
That's
right. Well, that sounds great. I'm going to jump off and let you read us a few of those short.
okay. First of all, here in Wood Street, some friends I had over several years that worked in the 911 center, a guy and a girl, overcame several health problems that he had, having to get a lung transplant, and it ended up being such a like a storybook, fairy tale storybook type of romance that they had, and everyone was so hopeful, but unfortunately, he ended up dying. And as I sat across the street from the funeral home, knowing them both and knowing what had happened to him, I, I was just compelled to write something. So many people in the community were shocked, and such a tragic end to that short and hopeful love story. So I wrote this poem called Let You Go. And here it is, Let You Go. How high that we could see, for a life in the stars above. How good to feel so free. How right to be so much in love. It was so very fitting, the fact that we'd even met, for a new chance at living, far past our old regrets. So we could feel alive then, in the perfect balance of a new romance, going someplace we've never been to, in such a victorious circumstance. But the tears on my face had to let it slip away. There was nothing that I could say or do, so I had to let you go. All the things you showed me, all of the love that we once lived, well, all that time you saved me, then I had to let you go. Not just forever, but forever and a day. You were the love of my life, and that memory will always stay. The beautiful choice that we made, till death do we part. And although you slipped away from me, you'll always live on inside my heart. And that's dedicated to the memory of Craig Beery and his widow and all his family. Were glad to see it. You're always nervous as a writer, kind of on the outside, even though you're friends, of what impact you will have. But I took the liberty of trying to write it from what I personally felt that Mindy, his wife, must have been feeling. And it was kind of scary to put it out there, but I put it out, and they were so happy that I did. So that's why I would always encourage you to express yourself in these situations as writers, because I think that's what we were meant to do. And this second poem is a short poem from my sister Beth Ann, who is a administrator to Bing Preschool in Stanford University. A very, very effervescent lady like you've never met. And if you've ever met her, you would absolutely love her. She's known so many people around the world, and everyone loves her. And for her birthday, my other fabulous sister, special sister Lori, suggested I write a poem for Beth Ann, my sister, to try to encapsulate that sparkle that she has. So I wrote this for her here a couple weeks ago. Beth Ann, in the depths of a distant galaxy, far beyond our own understanding, they discussed life's inconsistencies, the very things that the truth was demanding. For our world, it was so out of balance, in a place of unnecessary fear. It would take just a bit of encouragement, a simple person who could bring some more cheer. And she would excel at all of those wanderings to bring a brightness against their old strife. For the children of our future's enlightenment, a fond spot in the memory of their lives. A person of some understanding, at the whims of an astral commanding. This is what the stars were demanding. Someone who is totally outstanding. For the sparkle of a true effervescence, the clear simplicity of her own inner essence, changing hearts with her humble presence, like a star in the glory of its fluorescence. And the world would eventually see her. It was all just a part of their plan for someone who is meant to be here, and her name would be called Beth Ann. And that's probably enough for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kirk. And thanks to everybody for watching tonight. We very much appreciate you being a part of Tobacco's inaugural open mic for fall 2020. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. A big thanks to James Charlesworth. Thank you, James.
Thank you to you all. It's great.
All right. So we're gonna have to run now, and we'll see you back in the near term future. And we're going to for our next open mic. For those of you who are interested in hearing a little more work tonight, Dr. Fasonic and I also co-host the Writers Conference of Northern Appalachia's writing. Wakona's virtual live series, and we have tonight National Book Award finalist Deesha Philshaw, and we're super excited about that. So if you go to Wakona Writers Conference of Northern Appalachia's Facebook page, you can see us introduce Deesha Philshaw, Pittsburgh's own National Book Award finalist, that just announced within the last couple of I think a week. So we're jazzed. Thank you again, James. Thanks everybody for watching. See you next time.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
All right.